Hello makers, welcome to the Maker Noob. I'm Joe, and today we're going to talk about the Bambulab X1-Carbon. Yes, I am one in the very long list of people who has got a hold of this machine, so let's talk about it. The Bambulab X1-Carbon, which is the machine that I have here, boasts a print volume of 256 by 256 by 256 millimeters. It has an all-metal chassis and enclosure with lots of expensive looking glass. It has a direct extruder with a full metal hot end, which can go up to about 300 degrees. It is proprietary, so something to note here. It has auto bed leveling. It has a removable spring steel sheet on the bed, which is magnetic, of course, as well. Can be used on both sides. One of them is for PLA, PETG, and the other one is for PC and other technical filaments. It does have also a color touchscreen. It has Wi-Fi connectivity. It also has an activated charcoal filter with an extraction fan at the back, and that's where we would usually stop with the specs, but no. The Bambulab has a lot more up its sleeve. It has a LiDAR sensor attached next to the hot end. It also has an internal camera. It has probably one of the largest blower fans I've ever seen as part cooling fan, or as an assistant to the part cooling fan, because it does print at ridiculous speeds. It has its own app, it has its own slicer. It is also fully enclosed, so you can kind of control passively the heat that builds up in the chamber. And on top of this one, you can see this little box up here. Well, not that little, but that is the AMS. That is the automatic multi-material system. Basically, it loads and unloads filaments, especially when you're printing in multicolor, which we'll get to, or in multi-material. It doesn't work with TPU. It is also completely sealed. It does have little pockets inside where you can place your desiccant bags as well to hold the filament dry. And chances are there's a lot more things that I haven't listed because there's just absolutely too many. Feature-wise, so you've probably, well, if you haven't, you should, seen the live unboxing that I did of this machine, where out of the box, after pressing, I believe, 2-3 buttons, clicks, I printed a 17-minute benchy, which compared to the many benchies I've printed in the past, this is pretty much flawless. It looks absolutely great. But yeah, 17 minutes. And that is a machine that is comparable, or the speed's comparable to a Voron. The only difference is this is already pre-built. It's almost the same price. Now, the process to print something starts off with options. Of course, you can do the bed leveling, you can do the flow calibration, you can do the vibration calibration, you can do the first layer inspection. These are all things you can choose to omit, but if you want to see the full process, you can check the live stream, and obviously I'm showing you here. That process takes quite a while, but it is absolutely awesome to watch. So when you start to print, it does all these calibration things to see the resonance of the bed and the X and the Y, and it does ridiculous noises, which you can see on the live stream once again. And once it does that, then it starts printing a pattern on the build plate. And once it prints this pattern, it scans it with the LiDAR sensor, and it kind of takes a 3D image of it, and it inspects it, and it knows, or it calibrates itself to know how much filament needs to be extruded. It calibrates the linear advance as well. Following that, it starts printing the first layer. Once it does that, it will stop. It'll grab the LiDAR once again, and it scans that first layer to let you know whether or not it is a decent layer. And if it spots something, it will announce it on the screen, and you could also get a notification on your app. The only problem that I've had so far is the fact that it just continues. It doesn't stop. If the first layer is completely off, it just lets you know, and it continues. However, once that's done, it starts printing, and that's when the internal camera kind of takes over. It starts monitoring your print, and if it sees anything out of the ordinary, it will pause, and that is an awesome feature to have. Now let's talk about the print quality of the single color. It just prints beautifully at ridiculously fast speeds. It just prints beautifully. So this prints in 3 parts, and it printed it in a total of 12 hours. And it's just absolutely glorious. As you can see, even with those high print speeds, it managed to get the details quite well, especially the thin columns with very little deformation when it comes to heat and speed. Now, as I mentioned, I didn't print a lot with it, but I did print roughly about 100 hours. So that's about 12 hours. This, I started a print, but then I realized it's a bit too small. It's going to be over really quick. So I did it 1:1 scale, and once again, 12 hours. But in between those, I had started another one. And this is where things kind of started coming up to the surface. So this was printing absolutely fine. Somewhere during the night, it just stopped. It stopped printing. I don't know why. The machine thought it printed it at some point because it was due to finish overnight. When I woke up in the morning, I just found it like this. The hot end was stuck to it. It told me that the print is finished. However, the hot end was still heated. The bed was still heated. Fans were still on. Printer was frozen. And that was that. So I had to start it again, and that's where I got this end result. Aside from that, I managed to take the opportunity to use it for a customer order. I had a customer of mine who needed some fittings for railings. He needed 440 pieces of these fittings, which I have a box full here. These are printed in Polymaker ASA, and a bed with 80 of these took about 6 hours to print. I could turn over this whole order within less than 48 hours with post-processing. Now, let's talk about the multi-material or multicolor prints, which is essentially the AMS up here. It's something that I really wanted to learn more about. Having a bit of experience with the MMU2 or MMU2, Palette, Palette Plus, Palette 2, Palette 2 Pro, Tool Changer, kind of have an idea how that should work. So this was very interesting to me. Now, everything I'm saying here is kind of what I gathered from using it. So I could be wrong to certain extents, but I feel like I kind of got this down to a T. So once you insert the filament into one of the 4 slots, there is a sensor that picks that up, then a bunch of plastic gears push the filament to a certain point at the back of this, and then retract it once again into the spool, sort of like there, it's set right at that length. There is another motor, obviously, that spools or rewinds the spool, so it's constantly in the right place. So once you have a print which requires a specific filament, that filament is pushed to the back of the AMS where it's picked up by a stepper motor. This stepper motor will push the filament all the way into the printer and onto the extruder stepper motor, which is attached to the hot end. Halfway through there, or halfway down the line, there is kind of this slack mechanism, and the reason why that is there is because you have a motor that pushes the filament in the AMS, and you have a motor that is pulling the filament inside the hot end, the extruder stepper motor. And since those two might not be perfectly in sync, you have these couple of centimeters of slack. In fact, while you're printing, something that you'll notice is that the spool doesn't constantly turn. It just turns a little bit, stops a few seconds, then turns a little bit more, and that's where that slack comes in. Once it's picked up by the hot end, then it starts printing. Next comes the purging or the filament change process. The extruder will hop on the back, will clean the nozzle, will come back to the front, go to the left, presses against the chassis, and that what happens there is there's a lever which has a blade attached to it, and that blade will slice the filament clean at a 90-degree angle, leaving some filament in the hot end where the rest is retracted back into the AMS, whereas the AMS then will push the next filament through. The hot end will go to the back. It will poop some filament out while it's purging because it has a hole in the back where poopsicles comes out, or poopsy filament, philopoops come out. Philopoops, we're going to call them philopoops. So goes to the back, it philopoops, cleans the nozzle, continues. Once again, that thing changes with every color that you need. Whenever you take the filament out of the MS, you'll always notice that it's cut clean off. It is a 90-degree angle, so you'll never have those wisps. So in order to test all this out, I designed me a multicolor camouflage plant pot for a printables competition, which I didn't win, but it turned out absolutely awesome. This was about 44 hours in printing time. It printed beautifully. Halfway through, what happened was that there was so much purge coming out of the machine that it started building up at the back. It filled the filament box that I had set up to throw it in. It started going up the tube, and then a couple of those purges got stuck there, and the internal camera thought there was a spaghetti incident. So it paused the print and let me know. I woke up in the morning, saw the message, the printer was paused. I cleaned all the purge poop that there was stuck and continued the print. In fact, you can see there's a little bit of under extrusion, kind of like where it stopped, but that's okay, it's acceptable. The print turned out absolutely beautiful, and I'm really happy with it. What I'm not happy with is the stock settings for the purge. This bag right here, this is filled with purge. These are the poop pellets for purging the filament. And if you notice, so the most dense part is the color that's about to be used, and the more loose filament part is the filament that was already in the hot end, which is the part that was cut off. So you already have a few seconds of purge down there, which is still a bit of a waste. The other is too much purge, which you can set up in the slicer, of course, but I didn't. But for stock settings, this needs to be changed. I'm not going to go into the details of wasted filament. I've done videos about that. This can be fixed somewhat. Probably I could reduce this down to about 20% of all of this. And the fact that it's done like this, I can find artsy projects to do with this. So now that we've got most of the functionality and the print quality out of the way, we can start talking about the things or the issues that I've come across with this machine. First off, this should have completed, or if not, I should have been told that there was an issue with this while it was printing. It didn't, it just froze, told me that it kept on printing, told me that it finished printing, but obviously it didn't, and this was supposed to be caught, but it didn't. So I'm gonna say it's a software bug. Now, Bambulab have already said the machine is 100% complete, software still needs work. So I'm gonna put it down to software. Software issues, once again, are the fact that for some reason, large files, I cannot put them on an SD card because the slicer keeps on freezing. So I have to transfer them via Wi-Fi. Now, my Wi-Fi modem, it's literally maybe 5 meters away from here. I barely get a signal on this because it only uses 2.4G, not 5G. And if I try to transfer a large file, it takes about 20-30 minutes, which is ridiculous. But I cannot transfer it via SD card because it gets frozen. Sometimes when I do that, it doesn't show up on the screen. I have no idea why. Once again, software. The slicer, by the way, is pretty decent. It has a very Prusa slicer feel to it, especially in the histogram when you slice something, or the painting, or it just feels very familiar to me. So it was relatively easy kind of to pick up. But let's talk about the hardware. Things that I don't know if anyone else has covered, but I want to cover. So first of all, the AMS. I do believe that that will be the first point of failure in this machine. As I was printing this multicolor pot, which, as I said, took about 40 hours to print, it started making really weird noises. Intermittent weird noises on the gears. Now the gears, as I said, are all plastic, and those are the first gears that kind of push the filament down to the back, and it just was making these really weird noises. So I kind of foresee that at some point might fail. It looks like all those inlets for the AMS for each filament are modular, so those might be replaceable. And there are other quirks that I have with this machine, mainly because there are a lot of things that were mentioned or that are mentioned on the website which I couldn't use or had no settings to activate. Like, for example, it says it has a sensor for the door, which it does. You open the door, there's kind of like a switch here which you can feel, and it should stop the print when the door is open, but there is no way to activate or deactivate it, so at the moment it doesn't do anything. Another thing that I really don't like is the SD card slot, or the micro SD card slot, where unless you have nails or a piece of tool, you will not be able to get the SD card in and out. So ideally, the side of the screen where the card goes in would have a little bit of recess, just so you can push it in all the way with the tip of your finger rather than having to use any extension to it. Another thing is the fact that it doesn't have an Ethernet port, which kind of bugged me a little bit, because, you know, you might not always have access to perfect Wi-Fi signal, and sometimes for security, Ethernet port is preferred, and the fact that it doesn't have one kind of bugged me a bit, to be honest. The top glass is something I probably would have put removable hinges on, or slide out hinges, because the fact that you can just remove the glass and have to put it on the side, you're basically risking breakages here. And if you don't have the MS and you want the cool air to flow through, you can simply just pull it up, whereas in this case you have to completely take it off. I tried to see if it has power off or zoom function. Turns out it doesn't, and that was really weird to me. So first I tried printing through the cloud, or better yet, sending it directly through Wi-Fi from the slicer. Started printing, switched it off, switched it back on, nothing happened. So then I tried a small file, I put it on the SD card, put it in the machine. First it didn't detect the SD card, but then it did. I started printing, once again, switched it off, switched it back on, and nothing happened. So power off or zoom function, not there. Then the filament runout sensor. Now this was very interesting to me, because the website says that it does have a filament runout sensor, and I would guess it does because you have sensors all over the place. There's more lasers, sensors, and cameras in this than the Death Star. So it was very surprising to me that when I cut the filament out while it was printing, it just clicked, because the sensor triggered up here. It started showing me a red blinking light. Now that tells me there are sensors, because the extruder motor stopped pulling filament through to extrude while printing, and the MS stopped pushing filament in. So at some point there was this tension, no filament was coming out, so I had to switch off the machine, or stop and then switch off the machine, and try to figure out how the hell am I going to get the filament out. And after a few very complex maneuvers, I had to undo the PTFE tube at the back, try to pull from one end, then pull from the other end, get the filament out. It was a very complex thing, one that I don't wish to go through again. Now, even if the filament runout sensor is located where the website says it does, which is somewhere around the hot end area, it still doesn't make sense, because the AMS has stopped pushing filament. And even if the extruder stepper motor is still pulling filament, it cannot do so because of the tension, of course. The filament will never reach the runout filament sensor if it is located in the hot end. So that also doesn't make sense to me. Now, obviously, once again, software related, because it does have the sensors. But all this brings me to another kind of topic. So this is a Kickstarter machine, and I don't do reviews of Kickstarter machines. The only reason why I decided to have this machine and do this video is because it is different. It's a startup company, granted, it's been around for 3 years, doing this in the background, everything quietly. Most of the people that work there come from DJI, so you can see that it is just a beautiful machine, and you can see that it comes from a design perspective of someone who knows a good product. And it has a lot of innovative features which I wanted to cover, I wanted to see, because something different is absolutely great. But it's a Kickstarter, and that is the reason why I said, should you buy this machine? Because I will never tell anyone whether or not they should back something on Kickstarter, because I've been burned too many times on Kickstarter. I know people have been burnt on Kickstarter. Kickstarter is not a shopping cart. It is like the Shark Tank for the general public. You have a company that is pitching you an idea, and you're investing your money towards that company in the hopes that it succeeds. But you don't have a return of investment. If that company succeeds, that company may or may not send you something in return. They're not obliged to, whether they're successful or not. Now, granted that I've seen photos of the Bambulab factory where hundreds of machines are ready to be shipped out, because they did say they're going to ship out in July. But there's still this thing in the back of my head, like, this machine essentially is ridiculously cheap for what it offers. And I keep thinking to myself, like, why is it so cheap? Like, it's a startup company, and at some point, you know, it's going to get overwhelming, because yeah, they managed to get 6 million euro. But that too will run out. And then I kept thinking about this analogy of McDonald's, where McDonald's loses money on every hamburger, but they make up for it by selling you fries, supersizing you, the milkshake and everything. So that's when I started thinking that it's very wise for some people to wait until people start getting this in their hands, see how it goes. Teething problems will come out, because at some point the web shop will come up. And that's when we'll see how much spare parts for this machine will cost. Because if the hot end is proprietary and this will cost you, I don't know, I'm just speculating, 50 euros, then you can start to see like where the money will come from. Everything else is proprietary in here. So I don't know how that's going to work out. And I do hope it's successful. I do hope it stays reachable from everyone to anyone, because it's a great advancement in the 3D printing technology, or the community space. I absolutely love this machine. But there's always going to be that thing in the back of my hand which kind of wants me to be cautious. And the thing that caught my attention was a discussion on Twitter where someone, representative, employee, I don't know, from Bambulab, did not deny that there could be a chance that there might be paid features which can be unlocked on this machine in the future. This thing has a lot of features, but what if there is more that can be unlocked, but you have to pay for those? And I don't know how that's going to work. But if people who back this, or people who buy this at the retail price and get the features that it has now, it's already a steal. I'm going to be completely honest with you. If it's successful down the line, 6 months, 1 year, and it's still this price with the same features, absolutely worth buying if you have the money. Granted, I know that Kickstarter is a very good marketing tool because it exposes you to a lot of channels. And I like the fact also that Bambulab waited until the machine was completely finished before they sent it out to reviewers, because at least they're not being beta testers to a certain extent, because we're still reporting the bugs on the software, which they will hopefully fix. Having said that, I will not tell you whether you should buy or not buy this machine, because that's your decision to make. I'm here just to present all the facts, present what I discovered on the machine, and let you make your own educated decision on how you want to spend your money. But that is it from my end. This review has taken way too long. I hope that it was informative enough. I hope that it's going to help you make a decision, not just on this machine, but on any other machine that you might see through Kickstarter. So yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'm sure that Bambulab will be viewing the comments. The disclaimer here, as always, is that Bambulab reached out to me a few months ago telling me about this machine. They offered to send it to me. I accepted. No money has exchanged hands. I did this video and the live stream on my own accord. I didn't really have to. The idea was to test the machine, and I told them how against Kickstarter I was, but I was willing to have a look at it because of what it offered. No money has exchanged hands. Bambulab does not have a say in this video. Everything I spoke about and said were my experiences based on the machine that I received and nothing else. Once again, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you like and hit the subscribe so we can grow this channel as well. That is it from my end, and as always, happy making, guys.